Thanks for joining us today here at Synthesis Workshop. I'm your host Alicia, and for today's Research Spotlight episode, we're joined by Julianna Mouat. Julianna received her Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Southwestern University, and she's currently a doctoral student in the group of Dan Weeks at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And with that, I'll hand it over to Julianna. Welcome, and thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much for the kind introduction. I am really excited to be here today to discuss our recent publication on semiconductor quantum dots for Metallaphotoredox cross-electrophile coupling. So the field of transition metal catalysis has been widely applied in cross-coupling chemistry. Cross-coupling reactions typically take an organic electrophile and a nucleophile, which in a traditional cross-coupling reaction is typically an organometallic nucleophilic reagent, and a transition metal catalyst is used to forge new carbon-carbon or carbon heteroatomic bonds from these substrates. While this is a robust strategy that is widely used in synthetic chemistry today, the major limitation in this field is the stability and availability of the organometallic nucleophilic reagent. The community has developed CH functionalization strategies as a way to circumvent the reliance on using organometallic nucleophilic reagents. In this sort of regime, a transition metal catalyst is used to selectively target certain CH bonds and prime them towards cross-coupling. And again, this is a ubiquitous strategy. However, the major limitation is the selectivity in targeting certain CH bonds. So our group and others have investigated cross-electrophile coupling as an alternative approach to both traditional cross-coupling and CH functionalization strategies. In cross-electrophile coupling, we essentially leverage the abundance and stability of organic electrophiles and use transition metal catalysts to engage these substrates in a cross-coupling reaction. The kind of key design principle in developing a cross-coupling methodology is facilitating certain redox events at a transition metal center so as to promote the catalyst towards a specific elementary step, such as oxidative addition or reductive elimination, etc. Traditionally, the strategy that's been used is to add a stoichiometric amount of a reductant or an oxidant to the reaction solution to generate this electronic shuttle of sorts. While robust, this is not, one could argue, the most selective way to achieve or promote this kind of reactivity. By flooding the reaction mixture with a oftentimes reactive species, there is a risk of the substrates or additives or other things in the reaction being engaged in a way that does not promote the reactivity that is desired. Metallaphotoredox chemistry has emerged as a selective way to generate an amount of a redox reagent in solution by using a photocatalyst and light energy. And so upon absorption of a photon, a photocatalyst in its excited state can undergo reductive quenching or oxidative quenching with the metal center and enact oxidation state changes at these metal centers, which can prime the metal catalyst to undergo a specific elementary step. Again, while a creative strategy, there are global issues concerning the scalability of photoredox chemistry, metallaphotoredox chemistry, and photochemistry, one could argue as a whole. Some of those limitations include photoreactor design, the light penetration of the solution being facilitated, and the key piece that we were interested in is the photocatalyst expense and tunability. Precious metal dyes such as iridium or ruthenium and other organic dyes have been widely used as photocatalysts. A key challenge facing the photochemistry community and metallaphotoredox catalysis and photoredox catalysis as a whole is improving the scalability of these reactions without sacrificing the desirable photocatalyst properties. to highlight a brief survey of the current methods that exist within Metallaphotoredox cross-electrophile coupling, focusing in on scalability. The Macmillan Group has disclosed a series of reports using iridium photocatalysts and these supersilane reagents, which are used to abstract halogen atoms from alkyl electrophiles to efficiently realign alkyl radicals. Likewise, the groups of Lett and Vannucci have also disclosed alkyl halide, aryl halide cross-electrophile coupling reactions using iridium catalysts and, instead of silane reagents, organic reductants in the system. Lastly, the Noel group has disclosed a method using benzophenone as an organic photocatalyst and the supersilane reagent as a reductant in the system. While all of these approaches have provided an advance in the field of Metallaphotoredox cross-electrophile coupling, the challenge is that each of these reactions, there is one component that could be considered a reaction cost driver. The silane reagents are quite expensive and sometimes have to be tuned to be able to efficiently engage with different alkyl halide electrophiles, and the iridium photocatalysts are quite expensive. Even synthesized from iridium trichloride, the expense and inability for these catalysts to be recycled is an ongoing issue. Our question sort of driving this work was what practical advances could we make with respect to the photocatalysts and the other reaction conditions that are currently disclosed in these Metallaphotoredox cross-electrophile coupling strategies. Our group and others have explored semiconductor quantum dots as potential photocatalyst candidates for organic photoredox catalyzed transformations. Quantum dots are uniquely positioned between that of a small molecule and a bulk semiconductor in terms of their electronic structure. So if we consider a small molecule where the HOMO and LUMO orbitals are effectively quantized and set in their energy, as we increase the number of atoms in a system to where we are approaching several orders of magnitude more atoms in a material such as a bulk semiconductor, the electronic structure of the material can better be described as having higher and lower density of energetic states. These densities can be high energy or low energy, so you can have a low energy valence band and a higher energy population of states in a conduction band, and the low density of energetic states comprises the band gap of the semiconductor. So quantum dots are kind of uniquely in between these two regimes in that they have several orders of magnitude more atoms in a small molecule, but several orders of magnitude less atoms in a bulk semiconductor. Upon absorption of a photon, an electron-hole pair is generated, and this pair is referred to as the exciton. This electron, or this hole, acts in a similar manner to a small molecule photocatalyst in that the electron can go and act as a potent photoreductant, or a hole in the valence band can act as a photooxidant. Quantum dots get their name from this quantum confinement effect that really is responsible for the modular photocatalyst properties that are dependent largely on quantum dot size. This becomes a particle in a box problem where, as the diameter of the quantum dot increases, the band gap between the valence band and conduction band begins to decrease. This manifests itself in very tunable optical and electrochemical properties that are dependent on the size of the nanocrystal. Another consideration of semiconductor quantum dots is that their synthesis is relatively straightforward. Oftentimes, quantum dots are synthesized using one-step synthetic procedures, such as a hot injection method, wherein a metal oxide or other metal precursor that is relatively inexpensive is stirred and heated under a very high boiling solvent, and then at a critical nucleation temperature, the chalcogenide precursor is injected and the nanocrystal is grown at a certain temperature and sort of nucleated at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time. After this part of the synthesis, the purification is also relatively straightforward and can be achieved by precipitating the nanocrystals with a series of pro and anti-solvents that essentially purify residual ligand or residual solvent away from the quantum dot nanocrystal. Once purified, these nanocrystals can be stored in organic solvents as colloidal solutions for a number of months, and they can be characterized quite simply with UV-Vis and photoluminescence spectroscopies, which are common optical spectroscopic methods that help determine the size, the dispersity, and the concentration of the photocatalyst. Quantum dots have been used with metals in heterogeneous catalytic systems, so several groups have explored quantum dots as photocatalysts that can turn over specific metals such as nickel, cobalt, titanium, iron, and others to achieve efficient hydrogen production or carbon dioxide reduction. And additionally, they have seen a growing presence in organic chemistry in the last few years. Our group and other groups have explored them for organic radical generation, as well as a variety of other redox transformations. But a second key challenge driving our motivations in this space is that quantum dots are still relatively underdeveloped as photocatalysts for Metallaphotoredox catalytic systems. Our group back in 2017 showed one example of quantum dots being used with a metal catalyst to achieve amine aerolation chemistry. The Weix group has also used quantum dots as energy transfer catalysts to promote palladium catalyzed Heck coupling reactions. The key challenge then brings these two fields together of quantum dots not being explored for Metallaphotoredox chemistry and also improvements that one could imagine being made to the current Metallaphotoredox cross-electrophile coupling methodology. The choice of nanomaterial photocatalyst, because there are a wide array of quantum dots that one could envision using for this chemistry, together with a senior group member, Daniel Enney, and two students at the University of Rochester in the Cross group, we were able to screen different types of nanomaterial photocatalyst candidates for this chemistry. We had some previous success with cadmium sulfide quantum dots in using them as potent photoreductants for challenging dehalogenation chemistry. We screened those nanomaterials first, and then similarly, we had previous experience using cadmium selenide quantum dots for a variety of different photoredox reactions. They didn't perform as well in our system. Additionally, we screened bulk perovskite and also perovskite quantum dots and nanoplatelets. Perovskite quantum dots have been explored in nickel Metallaphotoredox systems of a similar nature. Lastly, we examined cadmium sulfide and selenide nanoplatelets. While they provided lower yields for our system, these nanomaterials have not been thoroughly explored for photoredox and Metallaphotoredox catalysis, and so we were very excited for the opportunity to use these materials and explore them in our system. Further optimization showed that reducing the loading of the nickel catalyst, the amine reductant, and the quantum dots all resulted in lower yields for the reaction. Additionally, during screening of different reductants, we noted that reductants such as diisopropyl ethylamine and triethylamine were not as successful in generating product. Given the nature of our photocatalyst, which is a heterogeneous material, there is a surface environment of the quantum dot composed of ligands that are commonly long-chain fatty acid derived, species that help the quantum dot be soluble in a variety of organic solvents. And so several groups have studied the surface environment at quantum dot surfaces to gain a better understanding of how surface chemistry might impact the material and the material's competence to act as a photocatalyst. The Owen group did a study in 2013 analyzing different types of species that may liberate oleate ligands at cadmium selenide quantum dot surfaces, and we happen to also be using oleate as the ligand for our cadmium sulfide quantum dots. What they found is that alcohols were actually less efficient than amines at displacing oleates, and this type of ligand exchange may or may not have certain implications for the energy transfer, charge transfer capabilities of these materials. Something that we were curious about is if our reductant and the unique ability of TEOA as a reductant in this system would be compounded by the fact that it could interact with the oleate at the quantum dot surface. And indeed, surface chemistry on nanomaterials has been well precedented to have multiple impacts on the reactivity profile and performance of the nanomaterial photocatalyst. Similar to small molecule photocatalysts, wherein the electronics of a ligand might impact the electrochemical potential that the photocatalyst is able to harness, the same phenomenon can be described for the types of ligands that are coordinated to nanomaterial surfaces and how they might impact the band-edge potential of the photocatalyst. Similarly, different types of ligands can be used to modulate the solubility so that quantum dots can be soluble in a variety of different polar and nonpolar solvents. Different ligands can also impact the charge separation, so one might imagine that this would be useful in designing a photocatalyst that would have an delocalized electron or hole that could be productive for promoting deeply reducing or deeply oxidizing chemistry. And lastly, charge transfer and energy transfer kinetics have also been shown to be impacted by the packing of the surface ligands. And so we decided to investigate this phenomenon using proton NMR titrative studies, wherein we spiked in different amounts of our triethanolamine reductant to a sample of our cadmium sulfide quantum dots. And the oleate protons actually have unique resonances if they're in a bound or free state relative to the quantum dot surface. As we added more TEOA to our quantum dot sample, we saw that essentially free oleic acid was indeed being liberated. This evidence early on pointed to the fact that TEOA could be liberating bound oleate species in our catalytic reactions. To investigate this a little bit further, we did another NMR technique. We can actually use 1D nosy correlations, a technique that has been utilized in previous studies at quantum dot surfaces. So this technique uses 1D NOE spectroscopy. The theory behind this technique is that ligands at the quantum dot surface, if they're in sort of a dynamic equilibrium, will absorb to the surface and the tumbling in space of the ligands will slow down. So the protons are effectively polarized. And what can occur at the quantum dot surface when a ligand is bound is the polarization of a certain proton can be transferred to neighboring protons during a set mixing time in a 1D NOE experiment in the spectrometer. What we can achieve is polarization transfer from the bound ligand species to the free ligands. If there is no interaction with the surface, we would expect that there would be no contribution to a 1D nosy spectrum. After the ligand is desorbed from the surface, that polarization transfer is effectively maintained. This results in a counterintuitive finding that you would expect from doing 1D selective nosy on a small molecule, wherein we would expect to see positive NOE, so an NOE of an opposite sign for a small molecule, but in a large molecular system, we would actually expect to see a negative NOE, so a nuclear Overhauser effect of the same sign. And so the experiment that we designed was pulsing the methylene at 2.3 parts per million of our TEOA in a sample of TEOA and quantum dots. And what we found is that there was indeed a negative transfer NOE of the free oleate species, and there's also a negative NOE of the other methylene on TEOA, as well as the surface-bound oleate. Combined with our proton NMR titrative studies, this provides further evidence to suggest that triethanolamine is capable of remodeling the quantum dot catalyst surface. We were pleased to find that the quantum dot and nickel Metallaphotoredox system was able to tolerate a variety of different synthetically useful substrate functionalities, including differing electronics on our aryl component. We were able to effectively cross-couple some aryl bromides as well as aryl iodides and a variety of heterocyclic aromatic compounds, as well as primary and secondary alkyl electrophiles. And so returning to our theme of scaling considerations for nickel catalyzed cross-electrophile coupling, if we survey the main challenges of all of the different methods of nickel catalyzed cross-electrophile couplings, the heterogeneous method of using a metallic reductant, the main challenge here is generating stoichiometric amounts of zinc salts. Organic reductants have also been used. However, some of the amine-based organic reductants that have been explored have been shown to be somewhat insensitive to ambient conditions, and electrochemical methods, while circumventing the use of metallic reductants, there can be similar issues monitoring the kinetics of heterogeneous reduction and also issues with design considerations for the reaction vessel. In photoredox approaches, again, our main focus was targeting photocatalyst accessibility. And so what we wanted to do was take a couple of our high-yielding substrates from our scope and try to adapt these entries to batch, flow, and other formats. We adopted a benchtop procedure without any other firmware optimization using this phthalimide substrate from our scope. We found that we could obtain 53% isolated yield using standard Schlenk technique. And so from here, we wanted to try to scale both up into a flow system and scale down to a high throughput system. We were able to utilize high throughput experimentation and a 96 well plate to design a concentration plate to determine the lowest possible scale and concentration we could take the chemistry down to. And while we found that we took a bit of a hit in yield, we were able to achieve consistent standard deviations across each quadrant. Finally, we were able to utilize an in-house built flow reactor from standard laboratory equipment, utilizing a blue flood lamp and transparent tubing hooked up to a peristaltic pump. We're able to execute this reaction in a continuous flow style setup and isolate this substrate in 55% yield. So to give a brief summary and outlook of our quantum dot and nickel Metallaphotoredox cross-electrophile coupling platform with respect to photocatalysts that see common usage in similar systems, the quantum dot can be synthesized from inexpensive precursor materials. The synthesis is often one step and does not involve chromatography. And lastly, we've been able to demonstrate that our quantum dot system can be amenable to different scaling regimes such as flow and 96 well plate high throughput. With that, I thank you very much for listening to my talk.
Thank you to Julianna for the spotlight on the synthesis of semiconductor quantum dots. If you would like to learn more, please visit Julianna's and the Weeks Group's recent publication in ACS Catalysis. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support our podcast, please consider subscribing to us here on YouTube and following us on Twitter. Thanks again, and we hope to see you next time.